recording will be available on a website, which is clarec.org. For this first part of the event, we please ask you to keep yourself muted so the broadcast can remain in a good quality. During this session, you are encouraged to use the chat area to introduce yourself, tell us where you come from, what's your research topic, and why are you interested in participating with us today. We invite you all to access and follow us on our social media. We have a Twitter account, a Facebook, which you can see here. And of course, to get in touch with us if you like to by email. In our webpage, clarec.org, you can find the aims of the collective. You can find the profiles of the researchers who are part of Clarec, or events, future and oncoming events, as well as a section where you will find Latin American references and resources recommended by us as a way to reflect in how these influence our research, and also as a way to share this with a larger audience. To start, let me talk to you a bit about the program of today. So this event will last about an hour. First, we'll start by presenting the collective, its aim, and we will read what is our manifesto. Second, we will have some words from two very special guests today from the Faculty of Education, Professor Susan Robertson and Professor Ricardo Sabates. Then we will have a presentation delivered by a member, Consuelo Béjares, who will talk about her research, Youth Negotiation, Exclusion and Belonging at the Urban Periphery in Chile. This presentation will be inaugurating a series of meetings to share the work of our members and guest speakers. During Consuelo's presentation, please post your question in the chat box, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for the Q&A, where you are all invited to participate and comment on both Consuelo's presentation, but also on the collective itself. And finally, we'll have some closing remarks and final words. So before we started, we also wanted to express today our solidarity here with the Peruvian people who is today fighting for their democracy. We wanted to also dedicate these events to all of them. So now I will hand it over to my colleague, Alex.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexandre, simple Alex, second year PhD student as Rocio, from the Faculty of Education, and also a Clarec member. We would like to note that this collective is an independent group, although all the founding members are doctoral students from the Faculty of Education. The idea with this initiative is to have an open, independent, and democratic space for our scholars who wish to discuss or collaborate on issues related to education in Latin America. Also, you'd like to note that this initiative is represented not only by us who are here today, but by a broader community of Latin American research who in recent years have raised the idea of this collective. Thanks to them, Latin America has been more visible and present in the debate on education at the faculty. Also, thanks to their journey that today we find welcome environment for the emergence of this collective. To all of them, we consider honored alumni, we are very grateful. Clarec is now on an early stage, and we have many activities and ideas to be developed. We still have a manifesto that represents our views and motivation, and which we would like to share with you today. The manifesto will also be read in Spanish and Portuguese as a gesture of recognition of the language that represent our history and culture. Over to you, Rocio.
Thank you. Our manifesto. The foundations and functioning of the current global education system lie in northern and western countries' predominance, being these located at the top while some are at the bottom. Latin American ideas, alongside other southern perspectives, are not part of the hegemonic curriculum that top universities, together with the entire higher education system, reproduce. Latin American authors and epistemologists are rarely mentioned in this program and tend to be overlooked or considered as mere distant research backgrounds. In this context, the Latin American Research and Education Collective, Clarec, aims to constitute a space for Latin American perspectives towards a diversification and decolonization of academia within the Faculty of Education and beyond. to promote dialogue and collaboration around knowledge development of regional interest in the field of educational research, as well as to democratize access to knowledge produced in this very privileged and elitist place. This initiative was inspired by the common concern that we as Latin American students and allies at the Faculty of Cambridge, of University of Cambridge, shared during our academic journey, the need for representation and legitimation, and the opportunity to make visible the knowledge, ideas, and current debates within the Latin American context. It is, at the same time, an opportunity for bringing together researchers working on Latin American context and for opening up for anyone who's interested in participating or simply hearing more about it.
Nosso manifesto. As bases e o funcionamento do atual sistema de educação global são predominantemente ditados pelos países do Norte e do Oeste, estando esses localizados no topo, enquanto outros estão na base. As ideias latino-americanas, ao lado de outras perspectivas do Sul, não fazem parte do currículo hegemônico das melhores universidades, juntamente com todo o sistema de ensino superior. Reproduzem. Autores e epistemologias latino-americanas raramente são mencionados nesses programas e tendem a ser negligenciados ou considerados meros panos de fundo em pesquisas. Nesse contexto, o coletivo Cambridge Latino-Americano de Pesquisa em Educação, Clarec, visa constituir um espaço para as perspectivas latino-americanas, atento à diversificação e à descolonização acadêmica dentro da Faculdade de Educação e fora dela. Promover o diálogo e a colaboração em torno do desenvolvimento do conhecimento de interesse regional no campo da pesquisa educacional, bem como democratizar o acesso ao conhecimento produzido nesse lugar tão privilegiado e elitista.
Esta iniciativa se inspira en la preocupación común que, como estudiantes y aliados latinoamericanos en la Universidad de Cambridge, compartimos durante nuestra travesía académica, la necesidad de representación y legitimación, y también la oportunidad de visibilizar los conocimientos, ideas y debates actuales latinoamericanos. Es al mismo tiempo una oportunidad para reunir a investigadores que trabajan en contextos latinoamericanos y abrir el espacio a todo quien esté interesado en participar o simplemente escuchar más al respecto.
Now I will hand over to Susan Robertson, a professor and head of the Faculty of Education. We are very happy that you are here at the Faculty of Education to welcome all to this large event. Over to you, Professor Susan.
So thank you so much, both for the invitation, but also to say to all of you, congratulations. I think this is a wonderful initiative. And so in my formal position, I want to wish it not only all the very best, but to enable you to create all of the kind of intellectual seeds that will actually, it seems to me, generate lots of different and interesting kinds of developments on the curriculum front, on a different kind of imaginary. The bit that I want to kind of reflect on is how over the long kind of haul of my academic career, I've always found myself working with Latin American scholars, certainly down in Bristol and definitely here, but a very large group in Bristol. And I remember the Chilean students particularly inviting me to come and speak around about the time of the Chilean student movement. And in part, I guess, that was an invitation because I'd spent quite a bit of time in various ways down in the region. So the bit that I think I find really interesting about my own biography and my connections to Latin American scholars, it's in part, if you look at where Perth sits, I was brought up in the Southern Hemisphere in a place like Chile, for example, but we run down all of these, Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, Argentina, all places that I've been to and both collaborated with key individuals or done supervisions and so on. So there's a question of latitude. You're in the south, and the north is somewhere up there. And if you take that latitude across, you'll probably find you hit Santiago. And if you keep going, you're probably not far off somewhere like Sao Paulo and so on. like Australia, the Latin American world and the component bits of that world, if I thought of the bits that made up Australia, if you were to map the indigenous groups, they're huge, they're diverse, they're linguistically different, and they've been erased. And so I think the politics of the Latin American world and my sense of the injustices of the politics for Australia are bits that I feel quite strong about and quite deeply. But I think there's other connections for me that are really important. My first PhD student, who's now a rector, Pernambuco, came from Brazil, and here my first student, in fact, would be then the kind of person that gets you down into the region, sends other people, and we've kind of had a movement of Latin American scholars, even while I've been here in Cambridge. Most recently, Luis Genshin. Prior to that, it was Maria de Azevedo. So these sets of connections, it seems to me, the region itself, its attempts for itself claim not just a region for itself or multiple regions, but a sense of a Latin American world, a Bolivarian project, for instance, that's actually been particularly important. So I'll kind of finish there, but it seems to me that all of those things that you think are really important, and I stand alongside you and believe that they are, different imaginaries, different ways of understanding the world, different ways of intervening. And I'm hugely kind of influenced by as scholars, for example, Becky Talu, working alongside the peasant, the peasant movements and so on, to kind of encourage some different ways in which one might work beyond the institutions and work out into communities and to work with multiple knowledges and so on. I'm looking at Tristan here, and Tristan, for example, knows UNILA as at one moment, for example, that I remember being asked to go and speak at the launch of UNILA, which was a regional integration university. And for all kinds of reasons, the potential has probably been erased somewhat. But my sense is that that could be, those kinds of interventions could be part of your long-term. So congratulations, and I look forward to being in the various meetings as you get moving. So over from me.
Thank you, Professor Susan. Now I will hand over to Professor Ricardo Sabates. Over to you, Ricardo. Thank you very much for being here and support us as well.
Thank you. It is really an honor for me to have been invited to say a few words during this virtual event of Clarec. I would like to first thank all of you students for bringing to the faculty the knowledge and experiences from this region. Latin America is a region that shares many of the challenges faced by other educational systems around the world. We share a common history of colonization. We share common European languages, but we also contain hundreds of diverse and rich indigenous languages. We share rich traditions which have been merged with European traditions over centuries. We suffer from massive inequalities and great insecurities. Mm-hmm. We have dominant views, and we have oppressed native and indigenous knowledges. I was born and raised in Mexico. I lived there until I was 27. My family and friends are still there. And yes, I do have Latin American in my blood, and I do share the passion that is clearly shared by this group. In an informal conversation with Professor Nidhi Singhal about doing research in other contexts, she asked me, how can we undertake research in a context that is not ours? And believe me, Nidhi was not asking me, how dare do you do research in other contexts? Clearly, I don't work in Mexico. But I think her question is profound. I think she's inviting us in Clarec, in the faculty and beyond, to engage with our research in a way that does not reproduce our own views, in ways that does not impose our own biases. As Angie Murimirwa, Chief Executive of CANFED, reminded us during the Rio Center seminar last week, that we researchers should give a space to other schools of thought. In this sense, I would like to thank once again to all of you involved in Clarec for bringing the richness and knowledge of Latin American and the Caribbean to Cambridge. The space is yours, and I am sure that others will learn from your work. I will certainly will. Thank you, Alex. Back to you.
Thank you very much. We are immensely grateful to Susan and to Ricardo for their immediate support as soon as we share with them the idea of creating this collective. Their openness, their enthusiasm, their encouragement make us very more motivated to dedicate time from our challenging academic year here in Cambridge to develop this collective that we hope will be a legacy for future faculty researchers to push forward and go further. I would like to take the opportunity also to say thank you very much for Tristan McCall, who is joining us today, professor from UCL. And the first time we started talking about this idea, he also was very supportive and open to maybe join us in an event in the future too with us. Thank you very much, Tristan. Now we are proud to introduce our Clarec member, Consuelo Béjares, who will share with us her research. Consuelo is a PhD student at the Faculty of Education. She is a sociologist and she has a master's degree in social policy. Before coming to Cambridge, Consuelo worked in a research center, participating in projects to inform educational policy in Chile in the areas of segregation and privatization. She is currently working on her thesis in relation to marginalized youth, belonging to democratic participation using sociology of education, critical youth studies. We encourage you all to ask questions on the chat at any time, either about Consuelo's presentation and about the collective. Over to you, Consuelo.
Thank you, Alex, and hello, everyone. I'm going to share my presentation now. Okay. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. So I'm Consuelo, and I'm going to be presenting my ongoing research, which is I'm currently in the fieldwork stage, and it's youth negotiating exclusion and belonging at the urban peripheries in Chile. The main research question that I'm working at the moment with is how youth living in marginal spaces, urban spaces in the city of Santiago conceptualize and negotiate notions of identity, belonging, citizenship, and political participation, and how these conceptualizations are shaped by historically driven exclusions and accelerated transformations in the social and political conditions in Chile at the moment, mainly considering growing ethnical and racial diversity due to immigration and the political uprising of the last year. To understand this, I'm also wondering what logic of actions and form of political imagination and resistance is practiced by youth in these spaces, and how all of these processes are mediated by statecraft, education and policy, and the school space. So also, a question which is across all my research is about knowledge production. What is something really important in this group, so how we as researchers can consider coloniality of power and different epistemologies that are in place in the different spaces we are doing our research. So here, for example, in the middle picture, you can see the space I'm in here in the city of Santiago as a privileged Chilean. On the left, you can see the view from one of the schools I'm working with in a neighborhood at the south of Santiago. And on the right hand, you can see the view from my college in Cambridge. So all of these spaces made me ask to critically assess all the epistemologies that I am moving into and how I can understand my research questions starting from that. So I'm working, as I say, in the city of Santiago. Here you can see a representation of the city from the colonial times from an indigenous writer, Waman Poma. And now I want to show you a representation of the peripheral spaces of the city of Santiago by a Chilean musician. Some of you might have seen this from the reference I shared, but I'm gonna play this song for about 2 minutes. So I hope you can hear it.
Yeah. Vengo de Chile, el Bajo Chile es anónimo, actores secundarios en un filme antagónico. Ese Chile es al que definen de clase media, pero tiene las medias deudas que los afligen y lo asedian. El Chile de mis iguales y los tuyos, que no salen en las páginas sociales del Mercurio. No tienen estatua y no tienen calles principales, y no son grandes personajes en las putas historias oficiales. El de montones de poblaciones que nacieron por los mismos pobladores en las tomas de terreno. El de casas bajas variadas y los bloques, las casas chubi y los departamentos básicos pa' pobres. El de los almacenes y bazares varios, que quiebran cuando invade el barrio un supermercado. El de los cachureos peripersas, que resisten con fuerza al monopolio bestia del centro comercial. El de los que se van en metro pa' la pega, parados y repletos y en metros a la casa llegan. De los que hacen su viaje en Transantiago micro y no pagan el pasaje cuando está a la mano, mijo. El Chile de los carritos de completo y sopa y pillas que siempre pillas en la esquina de un gueto, donde hay menos escuelas que botillería. El Chile de mis secuelas, de mis penas y mis alegrías.
El Chile común y corriente, ese que no salen comerciales de TV, donde los vivos se abren porque aquí son sociales. Cuidado con quemarse con este mensaje. Vengo de Chile común y corriente, ese que no salen comerciales de TV, donde los vivos se abren porque aquí son sociales. Cuidado con quemarse con este mensaje.
So if you're interested, you can, sorry, you can hear the full song in our website. But I just wanted to share as a way of, we can talk about different type of representation of the city and the city spaces. And what you see, the representation you see, for example, in that song, which is called The Other Chile, is a discussion about how segregated our society is in Chile and in Latin America in general, and how the majority of the people, which is what usually seen as marginalized people, is actually the majority of the country. Sorry. So in this map, you can see the city, the metropolitan area of the city of Santiago. Here in the purple part is the wealthy part of the city, the most wealthy part of the city, and the red parts are the most poorest and segregated part of the city. I'm currently working with 2 schools in 2 different neighborhoods. One in the north part, which is the municipality of Quilicura. It's a mixed neighborhood, so you can see different socioeconomic status there because there is a lot of industry. And also in the white part there, you can see that there is a highway. So it's kind of a difficult to access for people to access that part of the city and to get out of the city. So that's why it seems like a kind of isolated part of the city. And Quilicura, the municipality of Quilicura, has at the moment the biggest Haitian immigrant community in the city. And the second school I'm working is in the municipality of La Pintana in the south of the city. This is a municipality which is usually portrayed as crime-related and stigmatized. And it is actually a very poor part of the city, and it lacks of state services. So here is a map of where the city, the school in the north part of the city is, where the red dot is. And this is the second school in the south part of the city. As you can also see, both of these schools are situated in the very margin of the city. So actually after the school is just land, is empty land or agricultural land. So they are in the very margin of the city. So to understand how young people navigate these spaces and live their daily life there, we need to understand a lot of the historical and contextual conditions where these neighborhoods were born, and the conditions of the Chilean society. So first, it's important to consider the coloniality of power in place and how this has shaped the city from colonial times, making it a very segregated city, and how later the global capitalism made the city to develop in a way where accumulation by dispossession create very marginal spaces. And here I'm relying on the notion of advanced marginality by Wakan and how the state take part in constructing the advanced marginality, in the sense that is a permanent marginality that is the state is not actually trying to end, but is building it. And in this, we have the state, we have class and racism as taking part of this configuration of the marginal space. And I have added here also gender as a very important element to consider in poverty and marginalization. So in addition to this, the specific condition of the Chilean society and how neoliberal policies were implemented during the dictatorship, which is under an authoritarian neoliberal state, create also this marginalization and a lot of privatization of the social rights here in Chile. Under the conditions also of a low intensity democracy. So even when at the end of the dictatorship, during the transitions period to democracy, there was not a full democracy, which implies that it was very hard for social movements and the society in general to oppose these policies. And we ended up with a totally segregated educational system, which was privatized and marketized, in the sense that the educational system here in Chile is actually, as the studies have shown here, is actually more segregated than even residential segregation. So how this have been moving and changing in the last years is through social movements that have been being led by students, secondary students, starting from 2006. And these social movements have actually reached power in the sense that have create reforms, political reforms. One of the most important ones has been the inclusion reform in the educational system. With this, I'm referring to not just one reform, but several reforms that follow a narrative of inclusion that is trying to replace the narrative of segregation that we have at the moment. And the secondary student movement has reached the point on 2019 that you might have heard of, the October Revolt here in Chile, that has is coming to reach the point of changing the dictatorial constitution we are living under. So with all of this, we can realize that the student movement, and especially secondary student here in Chile, has been a force leading democratization and social change. And it has happened in the same way in other parts of Latin America also. So with this context, I'm wondering how students, secondary students living in marginalized spaces of the city see themselves as part, for example, of this political participation, the student movement, or as political actors in their own spaces. And I'm relying on the concept of belonging and scales of belonging to understand how youth have a sense of belonging to their neighborhood, the city of Santiago, the nation state, and also in a bigger scale, the global system. I'm also using the concept of citizenship and identity, but the concept of citizenship is less useful to use with the student in the sense that it's seen as a normative citizenship related with voting or institutions that doesn't always make sense to their daily life. And the concept of identity or cultural identification is a contested concept in the sense that it's create an idea of a fixed identity that doesn't also have it doesn't always make sense in the daily life. In relation to this kind of concepts, we have been having actually in our group in Clarec a very interesting conversation about what is meant to be, for example, Chilean, what is meant to be Mexican, and what is a Latin American identity, and how notions and narratives of mestizaje or mixed race narratives in Latin America have created an idea of homogenization and whitening the identity of our region. And this kind of narratives in Chile at the moment, and especially in Santiago, has been actually challenged by immigration, and especially by racialized immigration from Haiti. So it's a moment where students at the school that share the space with people coming from different places with different identities have the opportunity to have a discussion and a reflection about what it is to belong to a place and participate as a citizen in that space. In this sense, the two neighborhoods where I'm working at the moment have some characteristics that make the political participation and political discussions to be not related maybe always with what we've seen as institutional political participation, but more in the sense of everyday politics. And this is related with the living conditions of the everyday life there, which is crossed by violence and material struggle. There is crime and drug-related issues in this part of the city that shape how people live their daily life. And also it's very important to have in mind how these neighborhoods were created through land eradication and social housing policies that during the 80s and the 90s is different for both neighborhoods, but they were creating in a sense that bringing people from different parts of the city. So the social fabric is not always in place as political networks that happen in other neighborhoods of similar characteristic, but that has a history of political organization, especially during the fight against the dictatorship. Another important point is the school management and the school resources. For example, I'm working with a private subsidized school. One of them is a private subsidized school and the other one is a public school. And there is some resources that the private subsidized school that is owned by a religious organization can put in place that is not possible for public school. For example, a mediator for Haitian students and a person in charge of pastoral and citizenship formation. One of these schools is also a vocational school, so it has a very strong aim in the sense of getting students out to start working. So the citizenship issues and general citizenship formation issues might not be a very strong aim. And the last important point I want to mention is how the October 2009 revolt, it was a breaking point in schools in the sense that it opened up a lot of discussions about political participation, and specifically in these two schools, it opened up the questions about how students see themselves in this struggle as marginalized students living in unequal conditions in the context of the society. So even when none of these two schools was very politically active before the October revolt, this it has made a change in the school discussions. There was more organization in the student union in these schools, and students actually participate in walkouts. There was also the participation in the walkouts as a discussion in the school, and participation in looting and other type of activities was also something that schools has been discussing, as students and their friends or families has been involved in this revolt. So this brings us to a very important moment in the Chilean society, and to have the idea and to have in mind how schools can be a transformative place for social change here in Chile, and how our research can use this as a possibility also, if we are working in this context, to put in service what we are doing for schools. So for example, here in Chile, this discussion that the October Revolt has opened up in the school, it comes together with the citizenship formation plan law that was passed in 2016 and is start to being implemented during this year and the next year, where schools that didn't have before a citizenship formation plan because it wasn't obligatory, they have to put in place and develop their own plan. So in these pictures, at the left, you can see this mural at one of the schools that it has a very idealistic idea of what students are and how students and young people can build the society. And on the left hand, you can see a call for action from a secondary student assembly that they put out in the public space. So I'm wondering how the citizenship formation plan of the school I'm working with, especially one that we are already developing this plan, can take all these elements and especially students' opinions to be included in the plan, and to have a space where students can make sense of their own ideas in a more daily experience way than an idealistic way. So for us as researchers, and I'm going to use this as an example how we can put our research to service, is that to the school presenting a plan that might have some kind of new ideas or new ways of developing citizenship and civic knowledge might be difficult to present to authorities. But when you have a research that is supporting that ideas, as in this case, for example, I can use the power that being in Cambridge and having a degree from here give us to put in service of schools that we are working with. So that's where my research is at this point. I'm actually waiting for schools to be open to develop a photo voice project and a walking ethnography project with the students, and that we can also add it to the citizenship formation plan. And I think this kind of This kind of discussion in schools are very important, because when you see, for example, research that have assessed civic knowledge here in Latin America and in Chile, as the ICCS survey, for example, that I have worked with before. The civic knowledge here in Latin America of secondary students is very low. But how can we explain that when we have a big, very strong secondary students movement participating in politics? You see that that doesn't make sense. So maybe we need to move forward to discuss political participation of students and young people in different ways, as we are doing it now. And I'm gonna end there, and we are gonna have now the Q&A. So I'm gonna pass it to Sofia.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Consuelo. That was very interesting. And I'll kick off the Q&A session a bit with my own question, but please, I would love to encourage everyone else to write a question in the chat box, and then we can field them accordingly. And this is for Consuelo on her presentation, but also more broadly about Clarec as an initiative and possibly how to get more involved. Consuelo, so as somebody who lives and works in the Dominican Republic, part of your presentation really caught my eye in terms of, you spoke about the racialization of Haitian immigrants, for example, and you also towards the end started to speak briefly about your methodology and the methods of a photo voice or an ethnographic approach, for example. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to, one, your methodology, but also within your sample, how you can imagine different characteristics, the intersection of, for example, race or ethnicity with age. Also, you spoke about a normative citizenship, for example, how citizenship maybe conceptualized differently for students of different age at the secondary level, because, for example, they may not have the chance to vote, they may be younger than 18, but how maybe if a secondary student of 18 may understand citizenship differently, etc. How these kind of different traits or characteristics or of marginalization, almost in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, may come about and play a role in your data collection and your findings, but also the methodological approach, if you want to speak a little bit more broadly to that.
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. I actually didn't have time to talk about the methodology, but I'm using a ethnographic approach that has been a little bit challenged, and I have made a lot of changes because of the pandemic. So I'm currently doing online interviews and conversations, and mostly reviewing documents that there is a lot of work about the peripheral spaces of the city here in Santiago. So my methodology has a second part that well, it was the main part, but I'm doing it now as a second part because the schools are closed at the moment, where I want to work from a student's view using participatory methods, specifically a photo voice project where students can represent their daily experience and daily notions of what it is to be part of certain neighborhood and to be what is their everyday notion of belonging to certain space. And from that we can build up to a bigger notions of political participation and citizenship. And the reason why I'm not very keen on using citizenship as the main notions to talk with a student about these issues is it is because it's very tied to a normative notion of citizenship that doesn't really make sense when you are in your daily life. It doesn't even make much sense to us sometimes, you know, because it's not what you do in your daily life. It's just that you kind of belong to certain spaces as you live your normal life. So that it has been worked better for my research. And in relation to the question about racism here in Chile, it has been a very challenging question because what you see, here we have been having Latin American immigration because of political crisis around Latin America from the 90s, and this has been very strong since 2015 because of the Haitian situation. So the racialized immigration has been posed a lot of, has brought to this to the surface a lot of racism that it was, of course, in Chile and in Latin America before. So as I mentioned, it comes from the narrative of mestizaje and the race of Black and indigenous people in Latin America. And I'm trying to think about this in different ways because, for example, when you see the narrative of immigration in the media, there is a lot of criminalization and discrimination against immigrants. And in schools, sometimes you see a different narrative, but it might be only in the surface also. So I'm not sure if, I think Jo Dillavong has left. So she's my supervisor and we have been having very interesting conversations about this, but how this has happened in other contexts where immigrants come to already marginalized neighborhoods and they are treated as this sacrificial strangers, so they are also discriminated in these spaces. So these are all questions that I'm trying to go deeper on my research.
Great, thank you. And while we're on the topic of methodology, I see some people have put up questions in the chat, so thank you. I'm just going to do them as what makes sense in terms of order. While we're talking about methodology, I see Ricardo has a question about quantitative methods. And I know that's something that, you know, they're trying to teach students within the faculty. Do you see a space of this particular methodology within your research?
Okay, yes, that is very interesting because I actually work on with a lot of quantitative methods before in a previous life where I work about civic knowledge. That's why I mentioned this. And I think there is a space in the sense that it's all built together to get a more answers and to understand all of these processes and issues. So for example, as I say, if you assess, if you use a survey, for example, to assess civic knowledge, is very different the results that you get when you talk about political participation in the everyday life or knowledge of what it is politics in the everyday life. So in that sense, I have two questions. So how important is civic knowledge in an institutional kind of way to have it on our schools? Should we have both a more participatory with discussions kind of space? And of course, we also need the institutional civic knowledge space to have it in the school. So to learn about what is a democracy, what are the institutions, etc. So that's a thing that I think putting together qualitative and quantitative research can help us to get there. And the second question is, how are we making the questions and surveys in the sense that, for example, the survey I'm talking about, the ICCS, is an international one. So it might be some kind of problem there that all Latin American countries are not getting the same results that European countries, for example. How are we asking that questions? There is a difference of how we understand civic knowledge here in Latin America and in other parts of the world that is influencing that results. So I think that it's also an important question that quantitative studies that work in a critical way could also develop.
Great, thank you, Consuelo. And while we're on the topic of criticality, Gibson Silva asked a question: do you believe that critical pedagogy may play a role in the citizenship formation plan?
Yes, of course. So in my research, I'm not researching or going very in deep in pedagogical aspect of the research question. And this was at the beginning, in fact, because as I say, at the beginning, the citizenship formation plan was not part of my research because I didn't actually wanted to do it in a very institutionalized kind of way. But as I had different conversations with the schools I'm working with, I realized that was something that they needed and they want me to do the research on that way. So I actually changed a little bit the directions to match my interest with their interest. And in that sense, I think I would be in the future. So I wanted to go more in deep in the sense that critical pedagogy and very important authors here in Latin America, of course, Paulo Freire and others, have done so much work about it that in a sense has been forgotten or leave out of the educational research in many ways, not in the schools, but because there is a lot of teachers working with that approaches. But in research, maybe it hasn't been a very big focus of work. In Latin America, we have this issue happening that higher education institution has to adapt to global trends. And in that sense, a lot of knowledge coming from here is lived out of the curriculum. So that's why we have this group, of course. So I think critical pedagogy in Italy put the finger on issues of giving us critically assess also their own situations and their own position in society in a way for transforming society.
Great, thank you. A little bit to that topic still, but a question: if you could share some thoughts on the recent Chilean constitutional referendum and the movement around that, and how that might be connected to the conceptualization of citizenship.
Okay. We have to take account that I think most of us, at least Chileans, have realized is that we live in a not fully democracy. So as I say, low intensity democracy, as some authors have called it, and this is an issue in different parts of Latin America. So of course, if you are living under constitution that was built in a dictatorial period, you can't consider that you are in a full democracy. And the interesting thing is that there is a intergenerations difference here, and that's why youth is a very, it has gave the Chilean society a lot of hope on that sense, because previous generations, including my generation, we were born under dictatorship, and we live our life under the transitions times that, of course, it shapes how you see power and how you can confront power. And that has changed in the new generations, and that's why there might be a different how we see citizenship and our possibilities of participation between different generations, and that is the change that has been being led by secondary students about not fearing authority and power in the same way that people who lived the dictatorship times has lived it, because there is a different now and the country could move to a more democratic society. So I think the opportunity for writing a new constitution that is going to be, for example, the first constitutions that in the world that is right in a paritary way, so the same number of men and women, for example, is an opportunity. We will see how that goes, of course.
Great, thank you, Consuelo. There are a couple more questions, but I am wary of the time. It's almost 11 o'clock, and I do want to give the final words to other Clarec members. So I'm going to move ahead, but if there's anything else pressing, please feel free to reach out to Consuelo directly. And thank you again for your presentation. Also, I'm going to encourage people to keep writing their countries in the chat, because we have a lot of representatives from all over the world. It's really cool to see from Ghana, Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, Finland, UK, Dominican Republic, Chile, Mexico. So keep it coming. And it goes to show you that Clarec, even though it's focused on Latin America and the region, can expand a lot more beyond that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Consuelo. And I will now pass the final words on to Ana Rubio and Ana Trigo. Ana Rubio, the dynamic duo.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Consuelo, for your insightful presentation, and thank you to our audience that contributed with such interesting questions. We are delighted and happily impressed to see the interest of so many colleagues from different parts of the world joining us today, especially having the representation of so many Latin American countries. For example, as Sofia mentioned, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Nicaragua. Thank you very much. This level of participation strengthens our argument that there is a need of representation and legitimation of the research done in Latin America, in Latin American contexts, by Latinos and allies. And we hope that Clarec provides an opportunity to promote dialogue and collaboration around knowledge development of regional interest in the education field. So thank you.
We also want to invite you actually to our next event. It's going to happen on the 7th of December this year, where our colleague Sofia D'Angelo will share her research. So she's exploring how Dominican teachers and students' perceptions of effective pedagogy can inform a culturally relevant and building on strengths approach to improving teaching and learning. So we will send the details in due course for you to sign up if you're interested. We would like to encourage you to follow us in our social media, as we said at the beginning, to join our members database by filling a Clarec's registration form in our website. So if you go in our website, you'll see a link to a form where you can tell us more about yourself and why you want to join this group. And then you can also register your interest in participating in the future events. And feel free to send us your comments, questions via Clarec's website. We have there a form that you can fill in, or sending us an email. I guess at the beginning we put the email, but if someone can write it down in the chat. So if you have any questions, please send it to our email account. And once again, thank you all for joining. We're really happy for this very well attended event. And thank you, Conso, again. This is it. Well, we hope you enjoy the rest of your days. Oh, there you go. Those are our social media and our Gmail. So if you want to write them down. And also send your questions to Consu.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
I know there is still people here, but Anna or Annie, do you think we can save the chat with the questions?
Yes,
we can do that.
You can download it.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording now, okay?
Okay.